The coffee machine let out its final sputter with a dry hiss just as the email arrived. The sound brought me back to the waiting room. That hospital cafe smelled like disinfectant and exhaustion. It was my third time there that week, but first time I couldn't bring myself to drink the coffee. The sender read, Financial Control Institute, pending notification. No warning icons, no all-caps urgency, just a single line in the subject. Suspicious activity detected. Business account number 22940. I scrolled through the email. Attached files. A PDF document. A statement with 3 columns. My name, my signature, a transfer of $286,000 to a company called Gallia Limited, registered in the Cayman Islands. I looked again at the signature. It was mine. The room was quiet, except for the steady hum of an oxygen machine in the adjacent ward. A recorded message repeated every minute. Please, do not cross the blue line without medical authorization. The mechanical voice clashed with what I was reading on the screen. A sealed legal document stating I had authorized a 6-figure transfer, and I had no memory of it. I closed the laptop gently. The metal click felt louder than it should have. Bean. I carried my coffee cup to the trash and headed to the restroom, not because I needed to, but because I had nowhere else to think. The mirror was cracked in the top right corner. A piece of the fluorescent bulb flickered. I placed my hands on the sink. Let the cold water run, tried to anchor myself. The chill of the porcelain was more real than anything else in that moment. My name is Richard Cole. I'm 58 years old. I've been an industrial refrigeration technician since 1992. I have no criminal record. Never missed a tax payment. The only time I ever needed a lawyer was when I signed in the wrong box while buying my first home. My only real mistake was trusting Nathan. Nathan is my younger brother, 10 years younger. Brilliant, smooth talking. The kind of person who talks about investments the way others talk about the weather. He never stayed long at any job, always chasing the next big thing. 3 months ago he called me energized, said he had a clean, scalable green opportunity. I told him I was done with risky ventures. He said, you don't have to invest, just let me use your company structure for a few days, everything legal, everything monitored. You're just the formal vehicle. Those were his exact words. Few days later he sent me a contract, said it was standard. Just sign the last page, he insisted. His pen was already uncapped. Black ink, medium tip. I was at my workshop counter between work orders. I signed. I never saw the money. Never knew my account had been used as a bridge. Not until that email. I stepped out of the restroom, breath held. The hallway was empty. The receptionist flipped through a cheap romance novel. A man on the phone was quietly crying. That was the landscape of waiting. And now I was waiting too, though I couldn't say for what. I returned to the waiting room. The nurse walked by and called my wife's name. She was there for a scan. A routine checkup, they said. But the word cancer had hung silently between us for weeks. She looked at me calmly. She didn't notice anything different. She couldn't. Not yet. That night I waited for her to fall asleep before opening the laptop again. I reread the contract, compared the signature to others. It matched. He had used my trust as permission, and I had handed it over. I called Nathan. He picked up on the 3rd ring. Hey, Rich, you moved money using my company. There was a pause. Not a shocked one, just calculated. That's part of the operation, man. It's all covered. You signed, remember? Clause 3.2, joint liability, standard stuff. You opened a linked account using my information, without telling me. Legally, you authorized it. I just expedited things. He said it like he was sorting files in a drawer. Cold, neutral, no room for ethics. It'll work out. We're almost at the closing stage. Trust me. I did. Silence on the other end. Then a click. Not abrupt. Clean. Surgical. Like someone closing a door knowing you're still on the other side. I set the phone down. The screen dimmed like nothing had happened. No shouting. No threats. Just the quiet certainty that everything had changed. I saved the document as Contract Nathan Final.pdf and dragged it into a newly created desktop folder. Its name? Violations. Then I opened a notepad and typed a single sentence. It wasn't a confession, it was a warning. When trust is used as a key, the right door leads straight to justice. I closed the laptop. In the kitchen, the coffee maker still dripped its last dregs. The rhythmic sound filled the silence in the house. I walked to the window. Outside, the sky was too clear for what I felt inside, and in that moment I realized Nathan hadn't just signed my bankruptcy. He had taught me the exact tone truth should carry when it arrives. The first time Nathan mentioned green innovation, it came like a favor, not a request but an offering. Just let me use your company for entry, Rich. You don't need to do anything. All legal, all clean. Just helps with access. He knew how to speak. He knew where to touch. I was the stable brother, the reliable one, the guy who files receipts alphabetically and prepares his own taxes. He was the opposite, and that's exactly why he picked me. The story was convincing. According to him, the investment came from an international fund focused on carbon offsets via blockchain. Buzzwords that impress. Buzzwords that conceal. He showed me a PDF filled with green graphs, certification seals, digital signatures. It looked legitimate. Too legitimate. Big names are getting in on this, Rich. You'll thank me later. All he asked was for me to sign an organizational authorization instrument. Just a document, he said, to let him use my company as the initial receiving entity. A bureaucratic requirement, he explained, to give the process a local face. I skimmed it. The language was technical, bloated, but the name was right, the tax ID too, and I signed it. Bottom right corner. Not out of doubt, out of trust, blind trust. What that document effectively did was open a linked account in my company's name, with full access granted to him, and from there, Nathan began a series of transactions that at first glance seemed legitimate. Service contracts, issued invoices, incoming foreign capital. But there was a pattern. All invoices came from the same source. All services involved companies based in jurisdictions with opaque regulations, and all transfers went from my business account to entities that only existed on paper. Gallia Lantid was just one of the bridges. There were others, short, well-structured names that sounded reputable, but their substance was hollow. Websites with no physical address, phone numbers that rang to deactivated lines, business IDs registered with third-party proxies. When Michael, the forensic accountant who would later help me, stepped into the investigation, he said something that stuck with me. He didn't use you as a partner. He used you as a seal of approval. That was it. Nathan needed my clean reputation to build the perfect front, and he pulled it off. The transactions were chained. He sent split amounts, simulating payments for consulting services. Then, those exact amounts were funneled into digital wallets linked to offshore accounts. In under 72 hours, the money vanished from the accounting system, leaving nearly invisible trails. But the most brilliant part was the emotional layer. Nathan kept me, close enough to feel included, and just distant enough not to notice the gears turning. He called every 2 weeks, brought good news, said the company was being considered for ESG fund integration, that our stake was increasing in value. He even talked about buying a property together to diversify. Meanwhile, he was slowly hollowing out the structure I had spent 20 years building. He executed everything with technique, but the true engine of the scam wasn't code or contracts. It was blood, because that's what bound us, and that's what he used. The final blow came when Michael identified a PDF contract sent from Nathan's personal email, digitally signed in my name. The signature was technically mine, but the content said I had transferred full administrative control of my company to an unidentified third party. He beat you to it, Rich. He signed your exit before you even realized you were out. It was more than fraud. It was moral engineering. And worse, I had been the architect of my own collapse. In the eyes of the IRS, the banks, the regulators, I was responsible for every cent that moved. And there was no official complaint on record. Because the scam wasn't loud, it was meticulous. It needed my passivity to work. Nathan didn't commit an ordinary crime. He committed a familiar one. He used the language of love to shield the logic of betrayal. And when I realized that, I also realized something else. Justice, in this case, wouldn't come through confrontation. It would come through silence, through structure, through patience. Because the difference between deception and conspiracy lies in the number of victims. And I was certain I wasn't the only one. I didn't react, not that day. I still slept beside my wife, who knew nothing. Still went to the shop at 7 a.m., serviced a refrigeration system at a downtown hotel, greeted clients, sent the technical report, picked up the check. But something inside me had shifted. It wasn't anger, it was clarity, like waking up in the middle of the night and sensing someone passed through the house without leaving footprints. You didn't see it. But I started printing. Everything, contracts, bank statements, emails, even messages that didn't seem suspicious. I put it all in a folder, gave it the blandest name I could think of, Fiscal Checklist Q1. Bought an external hard drive, backed everything up in 3 different locations. One of them, a locked toolbox at the back of the workshop's storage room. No one went there, not even me. At night, while the house slept, I reviewed every clause of the contract I had signed. Each section carried double meanings. The responsibilities clause was a trap dressed as protocol. The fiscal structure section made me solely liable for any transaction made in the company's name, even by third parties. It was a crime designed to look like an accident, and I was about to turn it into evidence. I remembered Michael Trent, a retired forensic accountant. We'd met years ago when he handled an estate dispute for one of my clients. Discreet, methodical, unhurried. The kind of man who doesn't smile easily. The kind of man who spots contract flaws like others spot typos. I sent him a simple message. Need a second read, tax-related. Silent. He replied in 4 words. Bring everything, say nothing. We met at a 24-hour diner in an area where no one would recognize us. I handed over the folder. He opened it, said nothing. Scanned it the way you read a death certificate. Knowing the end is certain, just trying to understand why. You signed thinking you were helping? I thought it was temporary. It wasn't. He pulled out a blank sheet of paper, scribbled a few short notes without looking at me, then said only, "What I need to find is simple. The trail he left when he clicked, the frequency with which he moved the same amounts, and where he hid all of it within the language of the contracts." He folded the paper without showing me, and added, "Most scammers forget that even silence makes noise if you know where to listen." I left the folder with him, went home, brewed coffee for the next day, took out the trash. Nothing changed in my routine, except what was behind my eyes. Over the next few weeks, Michael sent short messages. Nothing that would raise suspicion. Checklist complete. Received. Comparison done. Then one different line. He reused your structure. He's done it before. Nathan didn't start with me, and he wouldn't stop with me. He'd used my company as a template, a mold, and he had already replicated the operation with others. Only the names, contract numbers, and environmental justifications changed. The rest was identical. Copy-pasted. Michael found a key detail. One of the documents used by Nathan had a digital signature in my name, but with a subtle error. The initials were flipped, small, but enough to prove forgery. That's what we call a technical footprint. Is it enough? It's enough to dismantle his entire structure from the inside. From that point on, we picked up speed. Michael contacted an old ally, an independent auditor, who sometimes worked with the Financial Crimes Division when cases involved fraudulent accounting structures. It wasn't a report, not yet. It was a consultation, and that made all the difference. Every answer we received confirmed our theory. The scam wasn't a legal mishap. It was a model. Nathan had professionalized fraud. I told no one. Kept working with clients, paying bills, going to the grocery store. Even the neighbor's dog, who I walked on Wednesdays, noticed nothing different. But my mind was elsewhere. Every night I reviewed a piece of the documentation. Every comma was a chess piece. The final clue came from the analysis of digital access. Nathan had logged into financial platforms using masked IPs, but carelessly left a session active with real geolocation twice, both times at his home address. Michael called it a legitimate crack. When a criminal structure forgets the real world still requires Wi-Fi. With all the pieces in place, Michael asked, "Do you want to take the legal route or destroy his reputation from the inside out?" I looked at the screen. It was a photo of one of Nathan's forged receipts. In the reference field it read, "Family is structure. Thank you for the trust." I closed the file and said, "I want him to learn that trust isn't an engineering tool. It's the trap of those who build wrong." Michael called me at 3:14 a.m. "That wasn't a mistake, it was routine. I need you to see this." "Is it serious?" "It's bigger." I opened the encrypted file he sent. A dossier, technical name, replicated structure, operational variations, real name, the anatomy of the scam. Nathan hadn't used my company as an exception. He used it as a prototype. There were at least 5 legal entities with the same transaction pattern, all registered under third parties with similar profiles to mine, clean, discreet, with trustworthy professional histories. The difference? None of them knew they'd been used, and none had signatures as complete as mine. What did that mean? I was the pilot case, the seal of legitimacy that made the others easier to clone. Michael laid out the connections calmly. He built a kind of mold, changes the name, tweaks the source of funds, adapts the pitch, but the foundation is always the same. Someone trustworthy used as a front without knowing it. One name showed up repeatedly as a secondary contact in 2 of the mirror companies. A lawyer. In another case, a woman who, according to the dossier, had briefly dated Nathan. All roads led back to him, or to someone close enough to know where, not to leave footprints. There were even records of online presentations hosted by Nathan about sustainable initiatives, with videos now deleted. In one of them, he said a line Michael highlighted in red: "Every innovation begins with someone who trusts before they understand." In that moment, I understood what Nathan had done. It wasn't just a scam. It was a system. I set the laptop aside, walked into the kitchen and sat at the table with the lights off. The city was still asleep. The only sound was the ticking of the wall clock. Each second marked another betrayal. I picked up the white porcelain mug, the one he gave me last Christmas. Trust is our strongest currency. He was right. He just didn't imagine that phrase would become evidence. Michael sent the files to a contact in the Financial Integrity Division, an investigator who worked in cooperation with federal agencies. Not a formal complaint, yet. Just a request for verification. The idea is not to raise alarms, just to plant the right flags in the system. And what if he's already preparing to disappear? Then it's time to let his own network trap him. Nathan kept posting updates on social media, meeting photos, quotes about entrepreneurship, links to generic articles on financial sustainability. Still flawless on the surface, but there was already noise. A comment on one of his posts read, "Curious, 3 different companies using the same founding charter." And on a corporate compliance platform, a topic emerged: rise in fraud cases involving simulated ESG structures. I didn't interfere. I just observed, like someone waiting for the rain after hearing thunder. That same week, I got an email, anonymous. The subject line was simple: "You too?" Inside a single sentence. He used my name. I lost everything. They told me you're building something. Signed, J.R. Michael. Traced the IP. It matched a 62-year-old woman living in a city 125 miles from mine. She had invested $90,000 in a project Nathan pitched, using a shell company identical to the one my funds were diverted to. I didn't know her, but she knew me, because her story was mine, just lived earlier. The network was alive. The difference was now it had a crack, and that crack was me. I talked to Michael about the next move. Do you want him to fall through the media or through the system? I want him to fall without knowing where the wind came from. That night, I cleared the bookshelf in my office, left only the mug and an envelope. Inside, a copy of the first receipt ever issued by my company, dated 1999. Amount $240. Description: technical service. Delivery completed. It was simple, almost naive, but that's where it all started, with the integrity he tried to use as bait. Now it would be the reason for his downfall. The protocol was followed to the letter. Michael submitted the final report to the tax authorities and the Financial Crimes Unit. The submission had no headlines, no names in bold. It was a technical dossier. Dense. Unquestionable. Nathan had no idea. And that's what made it all possible. On Wednesday morning, he posted a new photo. A conference room, 3 men in suits, captioned, "Expanding, structuring, scaling." Hours later, the first alert came through. A preliminary compliance investigation had been opened into one of the companies linked to him, a name he used like a satellite, the same one that had funneled funds from my account. The next day came. The second, then the third, each launched by different institutions. None with my name. Michael sent a short message. The gear turned. Now we watch. Questions began appearing in closed forums. One asked, "What's behind the string of ESG companies tied to the same administrator?" Another showed a screenshot of a service contract identical to mine, but with a different name, a different ID number. Nathan still smiled in photos. But the comments started to fade. One, left by a now-deleted profile, simply asked, "Who did you build this on top of?" Then came the hardest thing to ignore, an official alert from a regulatory agency, listing companies under preventive monitoring for misuse of environmental compensation structures. 4 of them tied to Nathan. When the first investors began reaching out for clarification, he answered smoothly. He was used to turning crisis into charm, but this wasn't a crisis. It was the foundation collapsing. Michael sent me a screenshot of an internal message circulating among consultants. "Avoid contracts with Group X. There are signs of ethical misconduct." X was the informal nickname Nathan used for his network of companies. It was only a matter of time. 3 days later, I got a call from a reporter at an independent legal publication. She said she was investigating a series of overlapping reports about environmental fraud using clean business IDs. "Your name came up as a strategic victim. No comment at this time. I understand. But just so you know, your silence is saying enough." She hung up, and I stared at the phone for a while, not out of doubt, but because in that moment I realized it was done. A formal complaint had been filed based on the evidence submitted. Nathan was summoned for questioning, not as a victim, not as a witness, as the main suspect. And then came the first visible consequence. His administrative rights in 3 companies were suspended. No arrest, no scandal, just a line in the system, a denied authorization, a blocked access. But for him, it was a sentence. 2 days later, one of the partner institutions issued a public statement ending all collaboration with any project bearing his signature. I didn't need to send anything, didn't need to show up. The structure he built using my name was now collapsing on its own. Michael sent me just one line. Now he'll have to sign papers he didn't write. Nathan emailed me. Subject: "Rich, we need to talk." The body contained 4 sentences. No apology, no admission, just concern. He said there seemed to be some misunderstanding with a few contracts, that people were confusing his roles, and that maybe we should align our versions before this turns into something bigger. I read it, closed it, didn't reply, because he still didn't get it. It wasn't about versions, it was about facts. His silence started drawing attention. The comments disappeared, the posts stopped, and his name began circulating in corporate fraud prevention groups as a case to be avoided. The following week, I was informally told that assets linked to the group were being frozen as a precaution, and other victims, now aware of the scheme, were starting to come forward. "Michael," was clear, "you weren't the one who took him down." "I know, but it was your patience that allowed him to do it to himself." I took a deep breath, looked at the file cabinet in my office, opened the oldest drawer, pulled out the first receipt from my company, and placed it beside the folder containing a copy of the complaint. On the cover I wrote by hand, "Seal of trust terminated. The complaint was accepted. The case is ongoing." And my name, at last, returned to where it belonged, that of the victim who didn't need to scream to be heard. But I didn't return to who I was. The workshop was sold, the equipment passed on to a trusted colleague. The physical records were burned in a quiet backyard fire, not out of anger, but for cleansing. I had to learn that holding on to certain memories is a slow way to relive the trauma. With the money from the sale and part of the restitution I recovered in silence, I bought a small property outside town. A single-story house, wide porch, and an old orchard in the back. 3 wooden steps separate the door from the ground. And every evening, I sit there with a dog I adopted and named Scout. Scout doesn't bark much, but he understands the rhythm of the house, sleeps in the same corner, follows every step with watchful eyes. It's good to have company that doesn't demand explanations. I wake up early, brew strong coffee, listen to AM radio, and work with my hands. I turned the old shed beside the house into a woodworking shop. Simple pieces, local repairs, nothing that requires rush. The town is small. People don't talk much, and no one asks what happened. Sometimes a local recognizes the name, says they heard something about a lawsuit, a complaint, a brother, but it always ends with a respectful nod, the kind that says some stories don't need to echo. Michael visits from time to time. He brings homemade bread. We talk about fiscal policy, about technology, about how silence has become a new form of resistance. "Do you think he learned anything?" he asked during one of those visits. I don't know, I replied. But he lost what he valued most, control over his own version of the story. Nathan wasn't arrested. Not yet. But he lost his reputation, lost access, and more than anything, lost the only endorsement still holding him up, my name. I heard through indirect sources that he's living in another state now, using his middle name for business. But wherever he goes, the trail follows. And with every new attempt, someone brings up the record, the case, the broken trust, not because I told anyone, but because truth has a kind of memory that doesn't need noise. I got a letter 2 months. Fargo, it was handwritten, plain envelope paper. Inside just 2 sentences. You don't know me, but I knew him, and thanks to what you did, I didn't fall for it. No signature, no return address. But the handwriting was steady, clear, no shakiness. I keep that letter on the fridge, held up by a magnet, right next to paid bills and grocery notes. Because sometimes all you need to keep going is a short sentence that confirms it was worth it. My wife and I are still together. She never once asked why I didn't say anything during the whole ordeal, never questioned why I seemed more distant, more silent. She just looked at me one night and said, whatever it was, thank you for staying whole. Whole, not unscathed. But whole these days I have no partners, no office, no packed calendar. But I have time, I have ground beneath my feet, and I have a dog who waits for me by the gate. Every evening we walk together to the fence that separates the orchard from the dirt trail. Scout sits and waits. I bring an old wooden chair and sit there watching the sunlight hit the leaves. The first time I did that, I still brought the grey folder, where I kept the entire case. Today it's at the bottom of a trunk, covered in old blankets. What I carry now is something else, a black-covered notebook. In it, I write short sentences, loose ideas, memories I don't want to lose. The last page says, some scams fall apart on their own, others need someone to remain standing, in silence, until the end. I close the notebook. Scout stands up, and we walk back home. No rush, no audience, no fear, because this time everything that's mine, it is protected.